This is Dateline News and Conversation. You know, I've had to take a step back from all of the really overwhelming, depressing, and histrionic news we've been bombarded with. Doomsday, the hysteria about the possibility of a nuclear exchange between the United States and Russia. And tonight, I'm happy to have on my show a friend. He's been here before. He's from Hungary. And I want to talk about what I see are as hopeful signs that not everybody is engaged in war, supporting war in Ukraine, supporting NATO. Hungary stands out, and their Prime Minister, Viktor Orban. My guest tonight, Ben Toth from Hungary. Ben, welcome back to the show.
Privyet, thanks for having me back. Good evening, Regis.
All right, Ben, I hope I'm not being delusional, but I have been seeing videos and photographs of massive demonstrations in Hungary against war, but for peace. And Viktor Orban, for many months now, has been opposing NATO and the EU and the hegemon across the sea, unwilling to send weapons and money to Ukraine. Can you tell me, you live there, what is it like? What are the people feeling in terms of turning away from this very dangerous, aggressive march to war?
Well, you left that wide open. But yeah, let's start where you started, which was the Peace March, which was huge, even in, Hungarian context, going across the two bridges that connect Margit-sziget, Margaret Island, and ending up there at a huge gathering, peace flags and all that, not in English, but in Hungarian. And that's where Orban gave his speech. What the West picked up on is, no, we are not going to shed Hungarian blood for Ukraine. This is not our war. But what they didn't pick up was the next couple of steps, sentences that he uttered, which was Europe is ready to go to war, and that would mean Europe's destruction, not just Hungary's. And this madness has to end. By the way, this was exactly why I, the communist, you already know, voted for this class enemy of mine back in early spring, about this time of year, 2022, as the SMO was just beginning, because he was the first one. It wasn't about how you hate the opponent, but he was the first one to say peace. That's it. And he is a major, major thorn in the side of the Brussels elite, which, is pretty much just stand-ins for the US. I mean, I just saw a campaign video that Ursula von der Leyen, that wicked fucking witch, did for her elections, which isn't an election, it's a selection process. She has to get heads of state or something aboard to say, yeah, you can stay for 4 more years. And she went to a fucking bunker, a civilian shelter in Finland. And that's where she shot this video saying, we have a lot to learn from Finland. This is elect me. And this is the strong defense future I will represent. She's representing the future where we build civilian shelters because Finland has 50,000 of them. It's absolute madness. And yeah, I'm glad that Hungary, especially in the last year, it has accelerated, has arisen as this force for this. Basically, it's a reaction to this war fever that has gripped NATO. And NATO has this disease where it won't even muzzle the worst of the dogs. I'm sure you've seen the little midgets, the Baltics, I forget, I think Lithuania's little president is Kaja Kallas, right? And she called
Yeah.
for the dismantling of Russia to create many, many little republics out in the bloody open. That's what it's a reaction to. I mean, I could go back in history. I'm not sure which way you want to guide this conversation. As you know, I ramble. But mm, let's go with Mr. Orban himself and what he represents. Okay, you can imagine him. Many people think he's a Russophobe by default because he's anti-war. He's not. He is somewhere between Erdogan and I'd say Trump, because he's an opportunist. He always has been. You know, where's the money come from? I mean, if you think of just not the post-Soviet space, but the post-People's Republic spaces, which were in the Warsaw Pact, which were aligned with Moscow but free, which was Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Bulgaria, Albania. I think that's pretty much it. You know, Yugoslavia had a different way to go, right? These places were pretty much thriving for 40 years, but that was the era from which he arose as a voice against. He was born in the Khrushchev era, the booming era. I was born later in, you know, the Brezhnev sort of getting into stagnation era. But he was the guy in 1988. Like he said, Ruski Koza, the Ruskies go home. Enough of this totalitarian, whatever the fuck it is. That was his message for tens of years, right? He was anti-Russia, just like all of these republics are. 1989, right? We go back to capitalism. Industries are dismantled, like bought up on the pennies, left to rot. Exactly the same. They've been shrinking population, all of the post-People's Republics ever since then, and deeply corrupt. Don't be misguided. He has oligarchs close to the government. So does others. That's not the point. But when you get further into life, he had his first government. Unfortunately, I voted for that one too. I was a teen, the late 90s, just as I was. He promised the rejuvenation of old Hungarian pride or something like that, and he delivered absolutely nothing. Then he was out for a while. But now he's been in power since 2010. So that's 14 years in a row. Now, 35 years of anti-Soviet equaling anti-Russia propaganda, but then he sees what happens to the West, right? And what he's worried about, just like Trump was, and that's good for a country, is his legacy, you know? Germany self-destructed. Well, basically the Russia, you know, the US blew up their Nord Stream pipeline, blew up their economy, and they just stood there saying, okay, what else do you need? The Western Europe is dying, and they see nothing but war, and he's worried. And thank goodness for that, because that's when he started to reach up more and more to the east. That's why we have, you know, Russian investments coming to build our nuclear power plant. Expand it. It was Russian built. That's why for, I think, 4 consecutive years, the largest investor in Hungary's industry has been China. The largest by like 2/3. Huge investment. You know, saving Hungary for a place like China is chump change. It's nothing. It's pocket change. So at least he's measuring his options. I mean, don't be misguided. He is an opportunist. And that's my only worry about him, that at the end of this, we will be, he or our country won't be trusted, you know? Just like Erdogan can't be trusted. I don't think he's trusted by Russia, but they get along. They have their calculations. That's my only worry. But I couldn't be happier for this change. I mean, as you mentioned, Hungary is not the only one. We can talk about the recent events in Georgia with the foreign agent. Let's call it transparency laws. You can talk about Slovakia, you know, the attempted assassination against Fico. Serbia, the first place after Macron's France, which was a disappointment, that Xi Jinping visited. The second was Hungary. And then Milorad Dodik, just on the second day, you know, the falsely created Bosnia-Herzegovina, and within that, the Republika Srpska, the Serb area, saying, yep, we're going to probably declare peaceful independence. All of this is a major change, a major shift in what Europe used to be, which is this ultra-liberal dictatorship. I hate when they call it Europe has become what the Soviet Union was, because the Soviet Union was never like this. Never like this. The People's Republic had to go. The foreign policy was dictated by Moscow, you know, because of survival. You know, we had to be the vanguard of it against Western imperialism. But internal discussions, trade amongst us, industry, that was all actually sovereign. And what Orban sees is a huge threat against sovereignty by the US. It's the attempt to subdue the entire continent and destroy it as much as possible and he's resisting for selfish reasons or for selfish ones. It doesn't really make a difference, does it, in the end? That's why I hope I didn't ramble too much.
No. Boy, I'm very grateful to you for the insight on who is this Viktor Orban. He's a very interesting personality, obviously, today. He's standing up to the West, to the hegemon, as is Serbia and Vucic. And the same thing as you mentioned in Georgia. The people are standing up against the empire. And what is it all about? I think you hit the nail on the head. It's about preserving your individual sovereignty, your culture, your history, your language. Now, Ben, as I look at, as an American, and I'm living in Crimea, the Russian Federation, as I look at the European Union, and I'd like your opinion about this, I think that was a huge mistake. I think that all of the countries that I visited, and I've lived in Italy, they ended this.
Sorry, you're having some microphone beeping. Yep. Okay. If you want to start that sentence again, we're clear now.
I think that these European countries have surrendered their sovereignty, their independence, their culture. And Ben, to me, the most important thing to any country is to preserve their own currency. And all across Europe, they're using the euro. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, I look upon this and saying, oh my God, I hope that the European Union collapses and that these countries can once again reclaim their sovereignty, their independence, and their history. What are your thoughts?
On this, exactly the same, but let me preface that with some hilarious news I read in some German, maybe tabloid level, I think in Spiegel, right? That there's some insider guy somewhere in the EU process who says maybe Annalena Baerbock, Annalena 360, the foreign minister of Germany, who gets offended on social media because a German citizen called her the stupidest foreign minister in the world and wants to sue that person. That chick might actually be the next, what do you call it? The EU, not the council, it's the EU, whatever Ursula leads, which I would welcome because she would smash this place to bits. There would be statues to her in Moscow. She would accelerate this process and burn everything to the ground. So yeah, that's what I see to the Western's madness. What you said about currency is even more interesting, and what I would say is talk to any Greek about the Eurozone and what they can do to manipulate your currency if you don't have your central bank and your currency on your land, which we still have, the Hungarian forint, luckily. And we are at least, Russia's been preparing for sanctions, I would say, at least since 2014, but maybe since 2008. We didn't have the luxury of such time, and we didn't have such foresight. We really never did. But finally, Eastern investment, strong ties to he was there at the, I don't know if it was the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation, or the BRICS Summit, but I couldn't be prouder. That's where I want my country to be, regardless of the leader, or that's where the future is being plotted out, that is where survival is. These Western countries, I know you say, culture and all that, but I think that the key issue is sovereignty. There are very few sovereign nations on this earth. If you have, I don't even know, but it's around 10 US bases on your territory, like Germany has, formerly West Germany since 1945, now Germany. That's not a sovereign country. You're occupied, I'm sorry. And no one in Europe is sovereign. There are very few sovereign nations in the world. Russia among them, thank goodness. China among them. And, the US and everybody in between, very few players. You can say Turkey has a limited, because the swirling dervish, trying to soothe both sides. But yeah, it's very rare to even have that. And that's why we have this Sovereignty Protection Bureau, exactly the same as the Georgian parliament just like finally made it into law. After 3 votes, the president, who was like 50 years old when she got her Georgian citizenship and that was put into the foreign minister's post and later became president, a French woman tried to veto it, and then parliament overrode it, said fuck off, which means that 20% of your income, if it comes from foreign sources, if you're a media organization or a politician, it has to be declared. That's it. It's a transparency law. We have something similar in the works. It's approved, it's being built, and I hope to God it's going to be, because the media here, what you have to understand about Hungarian society is not everybody was at the peace march in Budapest. There's another side of it who have on a steady diet of Hungarian Western funded media. There's one called Telex, which won't declare where its money comes from, right? But it has an English version, of course. There's a second one called 444, which is on the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy's list of top donations to Eastern Europe, reliable independent media. And then there's a third channel called Partizan, I think, who was supposed to be left-leaning by some theater academic gay guy, completely useless. That's the opposition. People who read this read the Brussels line on everything. And for that, everything is corrupt. Everything the government has ever done is terrible. And they're ready to basically get at the throats of people who say, sorry, we want peace. Maybe Fidesz is right about 1 or 2 things. So it's still a tense society, and we need those laws. I think every country in the world need these laws to just get rid of the agents of chaos. That's what I see these NGOs as. If you're just coming out of what do you call it, your first little pre-doctorate, your first degree somewhere, and they offer you like really good money compared to Hungary. But you have to sow this discontent, this line that the West pushes you, and create chants and create marches with EU flags and with English slogans. I mean, just a year ago, fucking Samantha Power, right? The US aid witch was in Budapest. And I said, holy shit, is Nuland coming next? But thank goodness Nuland was dismissed herself shortly after that. But yeah, bad omens around for countries that actually don't want to toe the line, especially on this war, which is, as you mentioned, it's giving you bad sleeps, is getting out of hand. It really is getting out of hand how mad the West seems to be in approaching.
Yeah, it really is getting out of hand. And, I think it was John Kirby, special advisor to Joseph Biden with Anthony Blinken. These guys are talking about punishing Georgia and
sanctioning the parliamentary members of Georgia. If that's not foreign meddling, go ahead.
Exactly. And you know what? I have thought, my God, Viktor Orban and Vucic in Serbia, they must have targets on their back as public enemies number 1 and 2 to the empire. Now, Ben, what I'd like your comments on, because I think for me, it's a hopeful sign, and that's the BRICS. Russia has the chairmanship for this year. I have been following this very closely. The website of the BRICS 2024 in Russia.
Kazan, baby, I hope we'll be there.
Exactly. And Ben, I see BRICS and what Russia really, basically, it's under Russian leadership. China is definitely a huge partner. But I want your thoughts on this. Russia and China have a vision of a future world order that foresees the collapse of the American hegemon, the American UK colonialist hegemon. And both of them and these countries, now there's another 30 countries that want to join BRICS. It will happen this year in Kazan.
Just this week, I think it was Thailand and Turkey. Hakan Fidan.
Turkey, unbelievable.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Exactly.
There were murmurs, by the way, they disappeared in an hour, that they also want to leave NATO. But there were murmurs about that too. Like NATO is becoming a danger to us.
So, Ben, I see this as a risky alternative to direct confrontation to the provocations of the United States. And let's be clear, forget NATO, forget the EU, it's the United States. The provocations towards Russia and China, especially, they do not want to risk a nuclear war. They are betting that their vision of a new world order will be successful. Ben, do you think this is a good bet?
How could it not be? I'll try to keep everything you said in mind, but let's take it point by point. One, avoiding nuclear escalation. I could say confidently, by the way I remember the three stooges of Biden is Kirby looks and sounds like a clown and has a name like it. Blinken looks like an undertaker. And Matt Miller, his spokesperson, looks like a vampire. Every time I see him, he absolutely does. So if someone like that were in charge in Moscow or in Beijing, it would already all be over, because these are amateur, hot-headed idiots, full of their, not supremacists, but what is the essentialist ideas? We are the best in the world. Those are the lesser people. How dare they? We can't have another way. Our way is the best. These people. So that's difficult to manage. But so far, Xi Jinping, Putin, the hug seen around the world, and they're not alone, have been, I would definitely add Iran at this point to this axis. It is called an axis in the West, although it doesn't matter. They are managing it masterfully. They're overextending this ridiculous war machine built on monopoly money that you could just print out of a printer, and it's going up like insanely fast. So what's happening is it's not in Russia's interest or in China's interest to have United States of America in a smoking hole, completely collapsed, as you say. It's trying to manage it, trying to get. It's very difficult with people like this to behave as a normal country. Would you please? Don't send your fleet. Don't be the policeman in the world. Just relax. As for the feasibility, how could it not be feasible if communist countries like China, socialist countries like Cuba, Vietnam, Laos can find it appealing? Opportunists like Orban, I heard this saying from an English guy who said this is so fitting for him. Orban, like it or not, he has his principles. And if you don't like them, he has other principles. That is exactly what the guy's like. If they can find it appealing based on just, it's a good deal, guys, you win, we win, then it's in everybody's interest. But the big domino that hasn't been played yet, first it was the sanctions and Nord Stream, but the confiscation of assets. Imagine these idiots stealing near 200 billion of Russian sovereign assets, mostly in Belgium, a tiny country that is nothing but a little tax. That's why the NATO and the EU is set up there. It's a nothing country other than, a tax haven. Imagine them stealing those Russian sovereign assets. I'm not talking about Russia retaliating. I'm talking about being, a Saudi rich guy saying, holy shit, that could be me. A Kazakh guy anywhere in the world saying that's not safe for our money to be kept there. And the gold exodus, the money exodus has already started. But if anything, this process has been much, much faster than I expected. Okay, the SMO began. I saw it as this cataclysm, this amplifying point in world history. But I never imagined, that 2.5 years later, we'd be at this point where, holy shit, it's becoming a reality. You can see the outlines. You can see the organizations. This whole Olympic thing in Paris, is already looking like it's going to be a farce. Whereas the friendship games, Hungary was very proudly participating, but also Ukraine was there. I noticed that. Like nobody seemed to comment on that, but that's the future. No politics allowed. Actual sports events. Now all they need is a proper court, a proper way to resolve disputes, and yeah, you're done. You're out of SWIFT anyway, so you're out of American control in your finances. You're out of American meddling in your international relations. But what has to be safeguarded in this new world is American meddling in your internal relations. So these NGO-cialists, they have to get rid of. And I just prepared something. If you want to put this on screen, I'd be grateful, to show you the opposition against Orban, which is why I still support him, by the way. I'll show you just a couple of biographies in English or translated into English. If you could bring my screen on screen, which is
let me see if I can get that.
It's down in the row where we are,
Now, how do I bring that on?
I think you click on the middle and say add to stage or something. A button will appear. That's how we do it.
I'm trying here.
Yeah, not on the layouts, but on the actual source. Where you are, I am, and this screen is. Sorry, everybody. I think it might be worth the wait. Okay.
There we go.
Right. This is Katalin Chair, head of the Momentum movement, which is one of the prime opposition movements at the EU level. She was born in 1988 in Quebec, Montreal. All right. Her husband, leader of another, this is translated, opposition group at the EU level, was born in New York, fucking USA. This is the guy they're touting as a freedom fighter, who you would call Piotr Vengri, I guess that's the Russian word for Magyar Peter. That's his name, Hungarian Peter, right? He lived for years in Brussels, and he only came home when his wife was basically, let's make her the justice minister, which was this woman. And basically, she had to quit under pressure. But this guy stole some recordings which have nothing in them, nothing incriminating, divorced the wife, and now he's in Brussels saying he's going to be the new party, the opposition against Hungary. These are foreign fucking agents. She stayed at home, and she is still in the lead for Fidesz. But anyway, this is the latest thing I saw. The Belgian EU presidency, which is at its last legs, Hungary is next, wants to muzzle Hungary. And what that means, just to show you just a little bit of context, this is exactly what it means. The EU governments, urging the EU governments to consider moving ahead with the procedure to deprive Hungary, which takes over presidency the next month, of voting rights. That's how much we kicked the bee's nest. And yeah, seriously, every country in the world should consider foreign agents laws. They should. If something appears like, ooh, this fantastic, very well-made media organization, it looks to have all the views in the world, where did the money come from? They have to declare it. That was my last word. I don't even remember where the question began, Regis. You know me, I'm sorry, but you can remove the screen now by clicking.
Well, Ben, let me ask you this. Do you think that they can deprive Hungary of their vote, their voice, and their leadership? Do you think they will actually do that?
I think they can and will. Unfortunately, I mean, what they've been complaining about for at least a month now is Hungary is still not vetoing any sort of European money, not individual countries' monies, but in tranche money to military aid in Ukraine, and they're getting bothered. And there were some other descriptive words, fed up and venting at Hungary and all that at the European level. However, the conundrum we face here is 1989. As I mentioned, our industries were destroyed. The economy was in tatters, and all of it was pretty much rebuilt to serve Germany, right? That includes auto parts. That includes most of the agriculture industry, which is owned by one man. We are dependent on the EU market. But now the EU market is dying, but there are still moneyed interests tied to that. That's why it's such a tricky position where we don't actually, I wish we could just leave. Clean divorce. Fuck you, fuck NATO, we're going to the East. unfortunately, I understand the bind that Orban's in, that it's not that simple when you've had, 35 years of integration into an economy that's now dying, which is, used to be the beating heart of Europe, the industrial center, which is Berlin. And yeah, it's a tricky situation if you want to look at realistically, as opposed to ideologically. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Well,
still very hopeful, but
no, I appreciate the insight. I'm learning a great deal. Now, Ben, let's focus on the BRICS.
BRICS focus.
This year, 2024, Russia has the chairmanship. There have been multiple meetings that have already taken place between the official membership on all levels, whether they be diplomatic, cultural, historical, scientific, in terms of health, on all levels. They've already been taking place. Do you see countries in Europe, like your country, eventually joining the BRICS movement?
The way our countries, we are 10 million people, tiny country, dependent, landlocked, by the way, not even access to the sea. So we're dependent on our surroundings. The way these countries, and that I would include Poland, unfortunately, is right now wedded to war and the West, but, Romania, Moldova, the people, is what's the best deal for me? And the moment BRICS looks like a fucking better deal, like, holy shit, their numbers, look at their buildings, look at how these countries look, as opposed to how Paris looks right now or Berlin looks. The moment that happens, what I imagine is not just a couple of little cracks and, let's go our separate ways alone, and then it slows down. No, it will probably be a cascade action, like an avalanche. Like, holy shit, they can do it, we're going to do it too. And I don't just mean, Hungary, Serbia, maybe the Republika Srpska, but the whole Balkan situation has to be resolved first. It's one of those historically unresolved situations like Ukraine was, for example. But yeah, Czechia has to be cured of this Pavel guy. But the old Czechoslovakia, definitely. Romania, we'll see. Right now, they're building a larger base than... Rammstein in Germany on the shore of the Black Sea. They're occupied as well. So is Moldova with this Maria Sandu, absolute foreign agent, US chick. And the people hate her. So that's why more than one region. It's not just, what's the Russian name for Transnistria? Pridnestrovyan Moldovan Republic saying, no, we're done with this. The whole chunks of the former EU could just go, yep, we're done. Look, this is where the future is. It's bright. You guys look like a deserted museum now. Everything that used to be Europe. I mean, the French cognac apparently now is under threat because of the sanctions war between China and the EU. Because like 8 out of 10 bottles of French cognac are sold in China. And they want to cut that economic vein. How stupid can you get? So yeah, I see hope for like a cascade. No, what's the better word for cascade? Like an avalanche. Just need one good example. And this whole thing, held together by slavish, hyper-liberal dogma, falls apart when faced with material reality.
So, Ben, I was on a bus yesterday in Yalta, and a man entered the bus, and he sat next to me in the only open seat that was left on the bus. I had met him previously. He was a teacher of English at a school in Yalta. They're now on holidays. And he leaned over to me and he said, a friend of mine from Yalta, who has lived in America now for 25 or 30 years, told me that he felt that the United States economy and culture and politics was in rapid decline, that it was going to collapse very soon. He said, "Do you agree?" And I told him, "Yes, I do." What are your thoughts on the collapse of the
Regis,
hegemon?
before that, stay with me for a second. When were you last in the USA? Because the last time I was there was in transit in San Francisco, I think around 2007 or 8. That was the last time I was there. And I already saw like, holy shit, these are worse roads than mine. Like I've seen some bad shit back then. I was going to ask, when were you last in the US?
The, I came back. Well, first time I came to Russia in 2016, 2017, 18, 19,
More recent than
and,
me.
and I left the United States in March of 2020, 1 week before the COVID lockdown. So
You
four
lucky
plus
man.
4+ years ago.
Okay, well, okay. I already saw the signs, but you know, you can just look at, and it's not just these horrible roads in California, in Philadelphia. It's pretty much every major city. I wouldn't feel safe. I don't have kids, but I wouldn't feel safe to walk my pug, who's just sitting right there. It seems to be a society no longer in decline. It's not just the American dream is dead, but rapidly collapsing. I mean, the economy has always been this house of cards, basically a Ponzi scheme of betting at the highest levels that belongs to 2% of the people. I mean, when they talk about deindustrializing Germany, which was forced, they did this voluntarily in the last 20 years. I mean, remember, what was it called? Motown was Detroit, where there was actual auto industry. You guys were actually shipbuilding champions like 40 years ago. American steel, that's all gone. Everything else is either servicing capital or this betting scheme at the top. What's going to go up? Is it going to be gold? What about properties? We bet this is going to go down, and that's how this monopoly money is made. Unfortunately, because everything in the world just 2 years ago had to be traded by the US dollar, what they did was, hey, we need to borrow. Let's just, it's no longer, a money printer, but a keyboard. Let's type in some digits. Someone will have to buy that debt because they have to use our currency to trade in oil, in commodities, in food, in all of that stuff. Thing is, that's no longer the case. And when that's no longer the case, just imagine this military budget, which is now close to $1 trillion, I think beyond 900 billion, just to service those 400-500 bases around the world, the jet fuel, the ammunition that you don't have, the Patriot interceptors that you can't make. This is what America still was famous of doing well, while everything else decayed. Just imagine what happens rapidly. I mean, one thing I can see is, not you, but Americans no longer having these, I don't know how many, they call it gallon milks or something like that. Maybe you'll have just a liter or something. You might have human proportions soon. I'm sorry, that was a bit schadenfreude on my part, but it's not looking good. It's not looking good, and I don't think people are prepared for. I don't think they've seen this before.
Ben, I'm not an economist.
Neither am I.
I have been listening to American and European economists. Jamie Dimon, the CEO of one of the largest banks in the United States, JP Morgan, has been predicting the collapse of the United States economy.
And the dollar.
And nobody seems to be listening. Now, I want to ask you this. If the United States economy is in rapid decline, meaning the Western economy, the global economy, will this be the end of hundreds of years of British and American colonialism of the hegemon. Do you see this as I do?
Look, I hope so. I mean, they have this, they call it the Thucydides trap, right? Meaning a fading empire and a rising empire cannot just change places without an actual armed conflict. They are in this mindset. It's mostly because of propaganda, because the one empire that was got rid of peacefully, which was through World War II, was the British Empire. But, don't forget, before that, there was the Belgian, there was the Spanish, Italy had some territories too. And I think Vladimir Putin said it, this really significant speech, like the vampire ball, the stomachs filled with flesh, making fortunes at the expense of others is gone. And that doesn't come, just because Putin said it. But we have to bring in the horrific events in Gaza. Because right now, I mean, Josep Borrell said the same, not Blinken, but someone in the State Department, maybe it was the vampire, said, we can't win back what they call the global South. South America, Africa, Southeast Asia, all of Eurasia pretty much, except for the Western little occupied chunk. They're never going to listen to them. They're never going to talk to them because they see a real live genocide unfolding in their eyes, in front of their eyes, with the full backing and support of these Western powers. And they see the hypocrisy, especially when you compare it with the SMO in Ukraine, where it's insanely hypocritical to have a big international peace conference, as we like to laugh about, which is coming up in one of not Geneva, but Lucerne, Switzerland, right? Where Zelensky's begging people to come along and they say, fuck off, we're not coming, which includes China, which includes Brazil. Anyway, compare that to the Middle East. And, I think we're beyond 35,000, mostly civilians, right? Women, children, dead. Everybody knows it. And people are pretending this is the rule of law. I mean, they don't call it the rule of law. They call it the rules-based order. But they lost these territories. I mean, remind me where Lavrov is right now. I think he's in Ibrahim Traore's land in Burkina Faso, where the Ukrainians are making fun of, but I think it's wonderful. He got the Order of the Great Stallion awarded to him just today. This is something I caught up with after work. But yeah, China and Russia are making friends everywhere. And the West, which used to be able to use not diplomacy, but the two-prong approach to the world, here's the sweets, the sugar, the carrots, sorry, or here's the stick. Make your choice. That's it. That's not diplomacy. That's not agreement. That's dead. People don't seem to know how serious this is. That it's never going back to that era ever again. We're just going to go in there, kill half the population, put some dictator in, and create a new flag and call it whatever the fuck. That era is dead. And Israel noticed this way, way too late, that they can't just do this kind of King Leopold or Cecil Rhodes style bloodshed in the 21st century when everything can be recorded. So I think that had like a secondary decisive factor after the SMO.
I spent most of today with a very dear friend from South Africa. He's an octogenarian. And we were talking about these things. And one of the things that I was trying to point out was that Russia and China are not willing to play the nuclear chicken game with the United States. That Russia and China were looking towards a new future, a new vision, which is encapsulated, I think, in their vision of the BRICS Plus movement. And we came to an agreement that this was a very high risk proposition, because what the neocons or the psychopaths in Washington want is a response to their provocations, a military response of some kind, an S and a if not direct military, into some kind of asymmetrical response to their provocations. What are your thoughts on the position of Russia and China in not taking the bait?
I'm glad they're not, but it also has to be said, and I might be a little controversial later on in this segment, that, you know, the West always says, here's this Russian red line and we crossed it and nothing happened. And here's this other Russian red line and we crossed it and nothing happened. Look how weak Vladimir Putin is. Those weren't declared Russian deadlines, which is how we went from helmets to Javelin missiles to Leopard and M1 Abrams tanks, and then HIMARS, and then ATACMS, which is the latest ones, where we got permission. They're doing the salami tactic of, you know, we'll do it by slices, but what we want is, basically a response. The thing is, you have to look at two perspectives here, which aren't the USA. Number one is Western Europe. I mean, I think this was last year when some insider high up in the British armed forces said, yeah, we have ammunition at the intensity of Ukraine to fight a war like that for about 4 days. Germany, which has about 60 tanks, could last maybe 2 weeks. French, who are the best prepared, they could maybe send their people into Ukraine to show them how to wield a white flag. Okay? They do not stand. Let's not even talk about the municipalities pretending to be countries, which we know as the Baltic nations. That's useless. They don't stand a chance against the 1 million strong, battle-hardened Russian army, and they know it. They know they've lost. They know the Kharkov offensive is coming. There might be a Sumy offensive, and it's not aimed at territory, which is how they look at everything. It's aimed at completely degrading, attrition, destroying the enemy armed forces, and it's successful. Now, here's the two aspects to bring into it that aren't the USA. One is Western Europe, saying, shit, if this happens, what the fuck will happen to us? What will happen to us, not just because our voters, because we went along with degrading their living standards in the name of free democratic Bandera Ukraine. So they have an incentive to bring the US in. By the way, the Telegraph and the Daily Mail, one tabloid, one semi-serious, both published maps this week of how the US could enter if there's a war, from the ports all the way to Ukraine. They published these intricate maps. You can see what they're thinking there. The second one is Zelensky, who I think clearly knows, as most of the world knows, he's lost without direct US interventions, which is why he really wants this in writing or in, you know, babbled up by the zombie in charge of the White House, saying, yes, you have my direct permission, because then he can say, see, it wasn't us. It was Washington, and they have to come in to save us. These are the perspectives that I think Russia also knows about. And that's why they're not responding to this latest. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that ATACMS recently hit Belgorod. Thing to know about this is not new. They hit Belgorod with ATACMS before. They hit Crimea, your region, with ATACMS before. Most of them get shot down anyway. So this is nothing new. But in the media cycle, what they really want is, yes, there's the US directly involved. They trust the power of the US, I think, very, very unwisely, and they want to get it in. Now there's the other side, Russia. Seriously, the best battle-hardened military right now in the world, especially when it comes to air defense or intercontinental ballistic missiles, the best. Second, the most numerous navy in the world is China. Maybe they're not battle-hardened or experienced. These guys know exactly what the West is up to, what they want to provoke. And thank goodness, I mean, I know there's the hotheads. I know there's the Solovyov Live channel right on TV, and there's the people's poet, Medvedev, always warning, you know, one Sarmat is enough to destroy Poland. It is to snap them out, you know, of this delusion that they've won. Because you only live in delusion today if you've grown up on delusion, right? And in the West, Western Europe since 1945, Eastern Europe in my places since 1989. The story is Normandy won the World War. It was the US, France, and Britain. They won the World War. And then in 1990, they won the Cold War. They won because they were better and Russia just Well, they're not wrong about that Gorbachev absolutely capitulated. But they have this false history in their heads. It's not 27 million Russians destroyed the Reich, 8 or 9, between 8 and 9 of the Reichsvolk, the assholes, died on the Eastern Front at Russian hands. That's why, Normandy, Zelensky's going to be there. Putin's not going to be there. I just can't get over this fact. But anyway, they grew up on false history, and they have these false notions. Because we won then, we can win now. It's extremely dangerous and extremely challenging. And here's where I get to the controversial part, because Israel thinks the same way. Both of these nations, as in the collective NATO and Israel, they need to face an actual fucking defeat to snap out of this. Not nuclear, as best as can be managed without anything nuclear, because no one wins a nuclear war. But I don't see them snapping out of this daze in any other way. Not advocating for anything specific. I've just noticed their behavior going, next Wunderwaffe is here, elation, and then all the way swinging back to panic. Elation, panic, and the elation is getting shorter, the panic getting deeper and longer. And yeah, Russia and China and Iran have a huge challenge at their hands, and thank goodness they're way better equipped to handle it than I am, because it is a dangerous moment. I think you'll agree that's why neither of us are really sleeping well.
Yeah. I really appreciate your insight, Ben. I really do think that the hegemon is in rapid decline, in decay. I think more and more countries around the world, and I hope in Europe, are beginning to see that.
I hope so.
Me too. And as my friend said on the bus today, do you agree that the United States is in an economic, political, and social collapse? And I agreed with him. Now, the question, Ben, is, will this dying, weakened hegemon, realizing it has lost this battle for the future order and control of the world, take the whole world down with them in a nuclear Armageddon? This is where we are today. Your thoughts?
My thoughts. Okay. I am still, I had Soviet-style education, at least in primary school, which means rational, STEM-based. I'm hoping that they have a good instinct of self-preservation and not actually go into the absolute mad. I hope the people in the strategic forces, in the US, know that a nuclear exchange cannot be won. There's no such thing as a limited nuclear war. I hope so. And what gives me a little bit of hope is, I think you like to mention the Davos crowd, which is mostly a media operation for this ultra-liberal clique. It's a PR thing. So you get young leaders. Macron, I think, was one. Kaja Kallas, another. The real guys, the upstairs section, you might say, met without any transcripts, without any cameras. The Bilderberg group met last week somewhere here in Europe, talking about the Ukraine conflict. And if you have like that kind of money, Standard Oil money, I'm saying Rockefeller not because of the Jewish connotation, but because of the huge amount of fortune at stake. They know you can go down to a bunker for half a year or something and get out, in the fallout world, and still not going to survive. There's nothing waiting for you. There's no luxuries. There's no yachts. There's no fortunes. There's no power over other people. I hope that this kicks in. That's the only way. You probably know, because you live in Russia, as Russians most, I think, celebrate Vasily Arkhipov, who was in the disabled Russian nuclear sub in the 60s. I don't recall exact year when the crisis was at its height, the Cuban Missile Crisis. He thought, because he lost connection with Moscow, he thought that was protocol to send off the nukes. That's how close we were. And it needed him and his first mate He was the first mate, and the captain said, "Let's shoot," and he didn't have his key. He resisted. Right. That's how we escaped nuclear Armageddon once. And back then, the tally was around 800 to 900 billion people. You know, Jesus Christ, that's how close we got. So I hope we never get anywhere close to some sort of an automatic accident ever again. Of course, he was discharged. There was an inquiry, and then he became a hero of the Soviet time. Vasily Akripov did. And it's stunning to me that whoever I talk with in the West doesn't know who the fuck he was. His story is not told. Did I answer the question? You know what?
It's not a matter of answering the question. I really appreciate your insight, Ben. I hold you in the highest esteem. We've been friends now for some time. We've been on several shows. Your insight from somebody who is not from the West, who is a self-proclaimed communist, but a person living in Hungary and looking at the world as I am looking at the world and trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Ben.
Very kind. Thank you.
Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and having this discussion with me. I think it's extremely important. I hope many people will see it.
I hope so too. Thank you for having me on. I'll be back anytime, and I hope you